Welcome back to Good Morning La La Land. We are so excited to have Transformation Tuesday with some amazing women that are making a transformation in all of our lives. Maureen Healy, which is such a great name for what you do. You help basically transform children, right?
I work with children, that's right.
So talk to us about that.
Sure. My background is children's emotional development. So I've been working with them for nearly 20 years. So throughout the U.S. and actually through the world. I lived in Asia and different places.
Oh, wow.
And helping them feel, healthier and happier is my focus.
When you mentioned living in all the different places, you lived at the base of the Himalayas and you were studying with the Dalai Lama. This is so rare and so special. What was your experience like? What did you learn from that?
Oh, it was extraordinary. Because they say you can learn by listening and just being in someone's presence. You can actually catch what they have. So I'm not claiming to catch anything.
But you caught something from the Dalai Lama.
But being there was just extraordinary. And why I went was I wanted to see how did they foster well-being in children in the Eastern world.
Wow.
So bringing them together.
So how do they do it?
They do it a little bit differently, and that was sort of really why I went. My first book called Growing Happy Kids talked about inner confidence or Eastern wisdom for Western parents. So that was right before I went and wrote that book. I went there, and I just had an extraordinary time.
So tell us, what is the difference? How do they raise their children?
I would say a key difference that sort of is a microcosm. When they take a child home from the hospital, so to speak, or where they gave birth, the first thing they do is introduce the child to the altar and say, this is our spiritual practice, and this is what you'll need throughout your life. So that was the first stop. So it's just a different mindset.
Very different. It's like, here's these toys in our world. Like, be content with some toys.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose you could compare it to like a baptism.
Right, but the first stop, not
even
the bathroom, not even the bedroom, not even the bassinet.
Wow.
It's like, okay, you need this, and then we're your parents, and we're going to help you. So it's just an interesting, different dynamic. Yeah.
What led you to focus on children and creating happy, healthy children?
That's a great question. Probably my own childhood was sort of a little rocky, and I just began my career working with CEOs. And I also felt oftentimes, not that all of them, but some of them acted like children. So I did.
Touche.
So I went back to school then and focused on child development and said, well, if I work with children from the get-go, opposed to like, say, 60, 70 years old, I can help them feel healthier and happier, and you don't have to repeat the same patterns.
But so much of working with children is actually working with the parents.
It's always working with parents.
And the family above and beyond. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think so many times even when parents bring their child in to a therapist, they think they're going to be fixing their child. And really, they're the ones that might need someone to fix it.
Right. And that's why I wrote the book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, for parents and educators and professionals. But yes, when I work with children, we always sort of secretly laugh and go, this is for your parents. They go, oh, I know. Because there is that recognition that we want to put the problem outside of ourselves, sometimes like, my son or my daughter, but it often clearly involves ourselves in how we parent or teach as well. So there is that dynamic.
So take us through it. So if I'm a parent, I come to you and I say, I have a little child.
Sure.
We're having some issues.
Right.
What do you do?
Depends on the situation and issues. But I would say the number one reason I still see people in my office is bullying. So a lot of times it's healing from emotional trauma. And it's giving children the tools and ideas, how do emotions work and how can I help you release them constructively versus destructively. For example, throwing a chair across the third grade classroom isn't ideal. So how can we shift that? How can we calm and take deep breaths and then make a smarter choice?
But what would you advise the parents in helping their children deal with the bullying?
I can give an example. For example, there was a parent who came to me and said, we're clearly having a problem with our son. He's getting in trouble with the principal. And I said, okay, well, let me talk to him. And the more I spoke to him, the more I recognized he was being bullied. But they weren't, the school wasn't seeing it. They were just seeing poor behavior on the playground. So they were seeing that he was actually acting out. But then when we got deeper, we realized, he was being bullied as well. So with the parents, we eventually brought him to another school. We made choices so that his environment could be supportive, could be healthy, that the people and adults in his lives were recognizing who he was and helping him.
This is one of the things that I love about you and your teachings, and also, of course, the book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, is that so much of it is about as a parent, being the change that you want to see in your children.
Right.
Right? And so can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think that's one of the things I've discovered in my own life is that, if I want to teach anybody anything, I can often show them better than I can tell them.
Right.
And this is especially true with children.
Right.
So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, children don't learn by being told. They just hear blah, blah, blah. You want me to pick up my homework or pick up my clothes or do my homework? But yes, if you can be that calming presence, chapter 5 of The Emotionally Healthy Child is about mindfulness, which is helping us learn how to calm and slow and be that refuge for our children when they're having these emotional moments. And then, of course, we want to give them the ideas and tools to release things constructively. But the more we have our emotional house in order, the easier it is for children not only to learn, but to mimic our behavior. So it is essential.
So true.
Right.
Incredible, absolutely.
This weekend, a woman stood up in the audience and she said, how do I deal with being an entrepreneur and a mom? I'm trying to balance all of it. And I was contemplating the question there. I was thinking, I feel like the answer always is to do our internal work because then it just transcends and all the other relationships. So I love that you do trauma work for the kids and hopefully for the parents because it's just out picturing over and over and in all the situations. So profound, huh?
Right, yeah. And also we don't have to be perfect. I think part of raising an emotionally healthy child is learning to repair the relationship and saying I'm sorry or maybe I could have done that better when something went awry and we dropped curses in the car or whatever it may be,
Yeah,
but learning how to help them and learn together.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. It's amazing.
Speaking of together, I have to give a shout out to Kim Corbin, New World Library, the publicist, and we share the same publishing company.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So how was that experience working with New World Library?
They were wonderful, really great. And I was writing the book and I live 2 miles from the Montecito mudslide, so I had to sort of bump it back and there was a little delay. And so they were just wonderful throughout the whole process.
So if there's one thing that you most wanted people to know sort of about raising an emotionally healthy child, what would you suggest or recommend?
Well, that it's a skill that we can learn. And one theme throughout the book is that we can all learn how to stop and catch ourselves and calm and then make smarter choices that are good for you and good for others. So children can learn that, and as adults as well. Of course, we all need it throughout our lives.
Absolutely true. Yes, and it's interesting. I think it's easy for us sometimes to think, that when we're making sort of mental or psychological or emotional changes, that there's something drastically or dramatically different about that than there is sort of making physical changes in our lives, right? That for some reason, we know that we can't go out tomorrow and run a marathon just because we ran a couple miles today. We know it's not probably possible.
Right.
But for some reason, we have different expectations around psychological and emotional changes. We think, oh, I've tried meditation or I've tried mindfulness.
Right.
It didn't work, but we tried for 5 minutes.
Right.
So it's something you have to practice over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's that incremental habit of getting and moving and making that progress. And seeing the little progress, maybe your son used to hit someone on the playground and now he walks away. Well, that's big progress, although it doesn't feel like it, but it is.
Right.
So seeing those little steps in the right direction.
Absolutely. Or he used to use a baseball bat, now he just uses a ruler. Whatever it is.
Maybe it's a Nerf ruler.
Exactly, a Nerf ruler, even better.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Maureen, so much for being here, for sharing your time and your insight with us. Tell everyone where they can find and follow you.
Sure. You can learn more on my website, growinghappykids.com. And there's all sorts of information and videos and free excerpts.
Just love that.
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Stay tuned. We'll be
Thank
back with more
you.
Good Morning La La Land.